Yes, I'm back with another video today, and this one's gonna be, excuse me, my weekly movie review roundup, episodes 30 and 31, because again, it covers the last couple of weeks, over which time I've watched 7 new films, mainly from this year. I think maybe 1 or 2 from last year. So anyway, let's get started with what I watched a couple Tuesdays ago on June 21st. I watched How to Be Single, directed by Christian Ditter. An okay romantic comedy starring Dakota Johnson, Rebel Wilson, Leslie Mann, and Alison Brie. Yeah, Dakota Johnson sort of plays a mousy, shy girl who's taken time off from her college boyfriend to come to New York, where her sister lives, played by Leslie Mann. She's a older woman, a doctor, a surgeon. Rebel Wilson is sort of a crazy party girl who works in the same office where Dakota Johnson goes to work. And Alison Brie is a sort of serial online dater. She's subscribed to all these online dating sites, and she thinks sort of she creates this algorithm to surf these online date sites, and she can figure out the best way to find the perfect mate. She's living above a bar owned by this guy called Tom. So it's about these 4 women, and of course the premise of the movie is how to be single. But I've been single for a long time, and their single life is a lot more interesting and eventful than my single life, I can tell you that much. Yeah, I liked Dakota Johnson in this. She's okay. Not really much of a departure from her character in 50 Shades of Grey. Like I said in my previous video, a lot of Rebel Wilson lately. She's kind of tired at this point. I've always liked Leslie Mann, and I'm a huge Alison Brie fan. Sadly, though, she's not in the movie nearly enough. And of course, all these 4 women shack up with different guys. Yeah, for a movie about being single, there's a lot of relationships and hookups and sex going on in this movie. Some of the guys in the film are played by Damon Wayans Jr., Anders Holm, Nicholas Braun, Jake Lacey, Jason Mantzoukas. Yeah, not too familiar with most of those guys except for Damon Wayans Jr. Yeah, it's an okay film. I enjoyed it for the most part because of Alison Brie and Leslie Mann, and it had some funny moments. But yeah, so yeah, I actually did enjoy it. Now that I think about it. So, How to Be Single, I gave a 7 out of 10. Alright, moving on to, I think Thursday, June 23rd, I watched The Brothers Grimsby, or just Grimsby as I think it's known in the UK. Yeah, film starring Sacha Baron Cohen and Mark Strong, directed by Louis Leterrier. Who I think is known as the protege of Luc Besson. He sort of directed films like I think 1 or 2 of the Taken franchise, or the Transporter franchise. One of those. He's directed some of those films. Anyway, this is stupid action comedy, of course. Sacha Baron Cohen comes to the territory. Yeah, the 2 of them play brothers who get separated while they're orphans. Mark Strong goes on to become a James Bond type super spy for MI6, and Sacha Baron Cohen stays up in the poor town of Grimsby in northern England, where he's married to, again, Rebel Wilson, appearing in another film, and they have like 8 or 9 kids, and is sort of a football hooligan. So of course, yeah, it's a weird film. It's not a very good film. It's quite an offensive movie. There's many scenes that are pretty hilarious, but there's also a couple of scenes where like Sacha Baron Cohen is sucking poison out of his brother's balls, which is really quite a horrible scene to watch. And there's one where they like hide in a I think in a horse's rectum or some shit like that. There's a lot of jokes and like a lot of really bad, poor humor. A lot of humor and bad taste in this film. But it does have its moments. Isla Fisher is in the film. She's like the person that Mark Strong communicates with back at MI6 headquarters. I've always liked Isla Fisher. And the most ridiculous thing in this film is there's a subplot of a football tournament where mastermind supervillain and supposed humanitarian played by what's the name, Penelope Cruz, is looking to set off this deadly virus attack above a soccer stadium. But the most ridiculous thing of this film is the fact that England, my beloved England, they're in the final of a football tournament, which is of course a fucking joke, especially after we got knocked out by Iceland last week. Yeah, probably the worst loss in tournament history, as far as I know, as long as I've been alive. Being an England fan since 1986, basically. So yeah, the fact that England are in the final of this soccer tournament, this fake soccer tournament that's going on during this film, I found to be very laughable. It's not a great film, but it does have its moments, I'll give it that, with some pretty crude humor and Sacha Baron Cohen doing his thing. Always like Mark Strong, he's a good actor. But yeah, The Brothers Grimsby, I gave a 5 out of 10. Alright, moving on to Friday the 24th of June. I watched The Finest Hours, directed by Craig Gillespie, who I think I talked about in my previous video. He directed, I want to say, $1 Million Arm, or When the Game Stands Tall, one of those. Anyway, this film is set in 1952, stars Chris Pine and Casey Affleck. It's based on a true story. It's about a daring rescue attempt by the U.S. Coast Guard of two oil tankers, which were destroyed basically in a blizzard out in the sea off the shores of Cape Cod. Yeah, Casey Affleck plays the engine room master of this oil tanker that gets split in half by the waves and the blizzard and the ocean, and he and the rest of his crew have to survive on this oil tanker that's sinking. Meanwhile, Chris Pine plays a young guy who works for the U.S. Coast Guard, who's a young captain. He gets sent out by his commanding officer, played by Eric Bana, with just a handful of guys on this tiny little boat to go out and rescue these guys from this broken oil tanker. Yeah, good, solid drama, great scenes, of course, on the ocean, big waves and rain and blizzard, all that kind of stuff. If you've seen The Perfect Storm, you know what the hell I'm talking about. It's very much like that film as far as its tone and the look of the movie. Of course, Chris Pine's fiance doesn't want him to go out because they're about to get married, of course. The woman's played by Holiday Granger. Yeah, Ben Foster is in the film as well. Who else? That about covers the main players. Yeah, Eric Bana is the commanding officer, and Casey Affleck. I like Casey Affleck a lot. He was good in this, and Chris Pine was good. Solid, dramatic film. The Finest Hours, I gave a 7 out of 10. Alright guys, moving on to this past week on Monday, June 27th, I watched The Boy, directed by William Brent Bell, starring Lauren Cohan. Yeah, Lauren Cohan, of course, from The Walking Dead. She plays Greta, an American who comes over from America to the UK to be a nanny for the Hillshire family, who own this beautiful looking mansion, stately mansion. Yeah, this elderly couple hire Greta to be their nanny for their young boy, Brahms. So she thinks, but of course, when she gets there, she discovers that Brahms is in fact a life-size doll that looks like a boy. So yeah, over the years, we've had a few horror movies with creepy-looking dolls, and some movies with creepy young boys in them. That's for sure. And this film sort of combines the two of them for a creepy looking doll that looks like a boy. Yeah, she's given a whole bunch of rules to follow, but of course, when this elderly couple leave on vacation, Greta is sort of creeped out by the whole thing, and she ignores these rules, covers little Brahms with a sheet. Yeah, some of the rules are pretty funny. Can't take him out the house, and she can't leave him alone. She must play his music really loud. Of course, Brahms, named after the famous composer, so she has to listen to classical music. And of course, she has to kiss him goodnight. But of course, she ignores all these rules, and then weird, strange things start happening in this old house. She hears noises and that kind of thing. Your typical modern horror film with the usual jump scares. But this film had a little bit of a twist towards the end, which I enjoyed quite a bit. In fact, I ended up liking this movie quite a bit. Yeah, I always liked Lauren Cohan from The Walking Dead. She's great on that show. Good to see her outside of that element. There's a guy called Malcolm, played by Rupert Evans, I think. Rupert Evans, yeah, he comes by to bring groceries to the house, so there's a bit of a connection there. So yeah, The Boy, good little horror movie. I enjoyed it. I gave it a 7 out of 10. Alright, moving on to Tuesday, June 28th. I watched Race, directed by Stephen Hopkins. Of course, the true story of Jesse Owens, the Olympic sprinter who in 1936 went over to Berlin, Germany, and defied Hitler and Hitler's Nazi idea of Aryan supremacy. Won 4 gold medals at those games in 1936 in the 100 meters, 200 meters, the broad jump, as it's called back then, or the long jump, as it's called now, and the 4x100 relay. The first half of the film starts off with Jesse Owens going to college, where he goes to Ohio State, where he meets the track and field coach, played by Jason Sudeikis, who plays Larry Snyder. So he has an interesting relationship with Larry Snyder. That's the first half of the film, and the backdrop of that is also that the U.S. Olympic Committee and the Amateur Athletics Association, they're debating whether or not to boycott the Olympic Games because of what's going on in Germany and the stories of how Hitler's and sorry about the bomb going off. It's 4th of July, obviously, and my neighbors are crazy. So yeah, they're debating whether or not to pull the U.S. Olympic team out of the games because of the race discrimination that's going on in Germany with the Jewish people, obviously, and African Americans. But of course, it's very hypocritical because at the time America was still deeply segregated and not that far removed from slavery. William Hurt and Jeremy Irons are sort of the two people butting heads on whether or not to pull out of the Olympic Games. And then the second half of the film is the actual games itself, and the fact that Jesse Owens got put on a lot of pressure for him not even to go over there and compete by the NCAAP, sorry. Yeah, it's a good film, good solid movie. Sort of takes liberties probably with the actual events and the truth of the whole thing, but it's a great moment in sports history, of course. This great moment before the tragedy of World War II and the Holocaust, all that kind of stuff. Actually, my favorite moments in the film probably involve the great filmmaker Leni Riefenstahl, who's played by Carice Van Houten, in the film. Of course, Chris Van Houten, Van Houten, sorry, that might be how you say her name, plays Melisandre, the Red Witch on Game of Thrones. She plays the great German director who directed the documentary film Olympia, which documents these events in 1936. And prior to that, she made Triumph of the Will, probably the most notorious propaganda film in history, the Nazi propaganda film for Hitler and Nazi Germany. Yeah, so the scenes involving her and how she's trying to shoot her documentary. She's got like 18 cameras surrounding the famed Olympic Stadium that was built in Germany, in Berlin, for these games, and still stands today. It's where the German national team still play most of their home games. It's a famous stadium and all that kind of stuff. Seeing her, and especially because she's butting heads with Joseph Goebbels throughout the film as well. And there's lots of really tense moments with Goebbels. I don't know the actor's name who played him in the film, but yeah, he makes this deal with what's his name? Eric Jeremy Irons. So yeah, as I was saying, the parts that involved Leni Riefenstahl, played by Chris Van Houten, were like the main parts of the film I enjoyed quite a bit. The whole filmmaker aspect of this movie. So yeah, Race, good film, good solid movie about a great moment in history. I gave a 7 out of 10. Alright, moving on to Thursday, June 30th. I watched 999, directed by John Hillcoat. Yeah, crime action thriller, starring really good cast: Chiwetel Ejiofor, Casey Affleck, Kate Winslet, Clifton Collins Jr., Anthony Mackie, Aaron Paul, Gal Gadot. Yeah, the film's set in Atlanta. Chiwetel Ejiofor is the leader of this crew that robs a bank. And they're in deep with the Russian mafia, which is headed by Kate Winslet's character, who's I didn't really enjoy her in this film as the Russian mob boss. She has a brother who's in custody over in Russia or something, and she's hired this crew, sort of a mix of mercenaries and corrupt cops. But before she can pay them, she needs them to do another job, and in order to do this job, these guys, since the cops led by Woody Harrelson, who's a detective, sorry, he's hot on their trail. Before they can do this job, they need to set up a 999, which is the code, the call for a officer shooting, and the officer down 999. So their plan is to kill a cop, and so all the other cops go rushing to the scene, and meanwhile they pull off this other heist on the other side of town. It's a very unseemly sort of premise, if you ask me. The whole idea of cop killers and corrupt cops, that kind of thing. It's not a great movie. It's actually really quite disappointing. I found it, but it's a really good cast, like I said. Poor Norman Reedus, the great Norman Reedus from The Walking Dead, also is in the film. Briefly, though, I was stoked when I saw him in it, and then he's only in it at the beginning, sadly. The beginning is really cool, like the opening bank robbery scene is really good, but then it goes downhill from there, I will say. So 999, sort of disappointed. Really good cast, though. I gave it a 6 out of 10. Alright, finally, on July 1st, on Friday, I watched Eye in the Sky. I think the only film that came out in 2015. Yeah, British film, directed by Gavin Hood, starring Helen Mirren. Aaron Paul is in this film as well. The late great Alan Rickman is in this film as well, one of the last movies he made. Yeah, Helen Mirren plays a colonel for the British intelligence forces, and she's running an operation that's about to happen in Kenya. It's a capture operation in Kenya. They're observing these these terrorists in Kenya. I forget the name of the group. Al-Shabaab, sort of military terrorist organization that operates there, and they have 3 of the top 5 most wanted East African terrorists all in this little house. So they're about to. It changes from a capture mission to a kill mission, and she's in communication with Alan Rickman, who's a general, and he's at Whitehall talking to the British um, politicians, the higher ups, like the foreign secretary and all that kind of stuff, and they're watching this whole thing evolve on television. Basically, the live feeds of the drone's camera that's taking pictures of this house. Meanwhile, they have a guy on the ground near the house, played by I forget his fucking name, but he played the Somalian terrorist in Captain Phillips, the lead guy. Let me look up his name. Oh, it's not there. Anyway, he's in the film as well, so he's there. He's got this little bug camera that he flies into the house so they can look inside the house. And meanwhile, Helen Mirren, as the colonel, is also communicating with 2 American Air Force pilots who are controlling the drone that's gonna do the strike, and they're operating this drone on the Nevada Air Force Base, and that's where Aaron Paul is and this other girl, and they're controlling the drone. It's a very tense, interesting military operation, procedural, if you like. Things get complicated when a innocent bystander is very near the compound, the house, and most of the film is debating whether or not 45-50% collateral damage is okay for this airstrike on this house, because what's going on in this house, these guys are suiting up in suicide bomb vests, about to go out and kill 80 people. They're pretty sure throughout the film that these guys are going to go out and kill at least 80 people, and the film sort of weighs the prospect of how do you weigh the lives of 80 innocent civilians against one innocent bystander. Yeah, it's an interesting film. It's a very tense movie. Helen Mirren is fantastic, of course. Alan Rickman, great as well. Good little film, Eye in the Sky. Check it out if you haven't seen it. And I gave it a 7 out of 10 as well. So there you have it, 7 movies over the past couple weeks. Thank you for watching as always, and until next time, I'll see ya.
Bond.